Hundreds of senators are now under the influence of a Sith Lord called Darth Sidious.
I sense a plot to destroy the Jedi.
You ever wonder how the Jedi, literal space wizards, completely missed the fact that the most powerful Sith Lord was sitting right in front of them? Like, come on. They had meetings with this guy all the time. To be fair, the Jedi did sense something was wrong. They felt a dark plot unfolding. They just couldn't trace it back to Palpatine early enough and prevent their demise. So, was it arrogance, or was there something deeper going on? Today, we will be talking about the real reasons the Jedi Order couldn't sense the threat of the Sith during the prequel trilogy, leading to their downfall and the rise of the Empire. Sit back, grab your datapads, and let's get started. To better understand the reasons Palpatine succeeded in manipulating the Jedi, we need to look back in history. After Darth Bane restructured the Sith into the rule of two, the Sith abandoned direct warfare and instead worked in the shadows, subtly influencing galactic events. Over time, the Jedi became complacent. They saw themselves as the guardians of peace and order, and after centuries without a Sith threat, they stopped looking for one. They assumed the dark side could never return in secret because in their minds, the Sith were incapable of patience. But patience was exactly what the Sith had mastered. Palpatine and his master Darth Plagueis played the long game, infiltrating the highest levels of government, controlling banks, corporations, and politicians, all while the Jedi remained oblivious. Even before Palpatine's time, we see in the Acolyte how corruption was already spreading, and the Jedi's authority was being questioned. The Republic, once built on faith in the Jedi, had begun losing trust in them. Politicians and powerful figures were more concerned with their own interests, making them easy targets for Sith manipulation. Even when corruption in the Republic became obvious, the Jedi believed it was a political issue, not a symptom of a larger Sith scheme. They were so entangled in galactic affairs that they failed to see how their influence was being eroded from within. By the time of the Phantom Menace, the Jedi were already losing control. Their connection to the Force was weaker than ever, and they had no idea that the Sith were not only still alive, but on the verge of victory. One key factor that people often ignore was the Sith Shrine hidden beneath the Jedi Temple. First officially revealed in the Tarkin novel, this ancient Sith site was steeped in dark side energy, and the Jedi built their temple on top of it. They believed this would suppress its influence, but the exact opposite happened. The dark side doesn't just fade, but it lingers, corrupts, and subtly twists the perception of those around it. For centuries, this slow corruption weakened the Jedi's connection to the Force, making them less perceptive and more susceptible to deception. The dark side was actively clouding their ability to see the truth, and therefore growing stronger in the galaxy. And it wasn't just the shrine. In the events of the novel Darth Plagueis, Palpatine and his master performed Sith rituals to shift the balance of the Force toward the dark side. These rituals weren't just ancient Sith traditions, they had real consequences. They made it harder for the Jedi to predict the future, obscured their ability to sense threats, and severed their once clear connection to the Force. Yoda himself sensed this shift, warning that the Jedi's ability to use the Force was diminishing. What he didn't realize was that this wasn't just a natural shift, it was engineered as part of the Sith plan. The Sith had spent generations ensuring that by the time they made their move, the Jedi would be at their weakest. This was one of Palpatine's greatest advantages. He didn't just rely on deception, he took power at a moment when the Jedi were already spiritually compromised, unable to detect the greatest threat the galaxy had ever faced. Even with the Jedi weakened, Palpatine still had to ensure that no one, not even the most powerful Jedi Masters, could sense his true nature. He perfected hiding in plain sight. Palpatine used an ancient Force technique to completely mask his presence in the Force. Unlike most dark-side users who radiated power, he made himself appear completely ordinary, as if he had no Force sensitivity at all. Even when standing right next to Jedi Masters like Yoda and Mace Windu, they sensed nothing concrete. This ability wasn't unique to him. Darth Plagueis and even earlier Sith Lords had refined methods to conceal their power. But Palpatine became a master of this technique. He could turn it on and off, hiding his dark side presence when necessary and unleashing his full power only when it suited him, like when he revealed himself to Anakin. On top of this, Palpatine played the role of the humble politician perfectly. He was charming, calculating, and knew exactly how to manipulate trust. The Jedi saw him as an ally, a supporter of democracy, and someone who respected their role in the Republic. At the same time, he orchestrated chaos from behind the scenes, fueling political instability and making sure the Jedi were too distracted to focus on him. By keeping them involved in Republic affairs, he ensured that they saw the corruption as a political problem, not a Sith plot. But despite all this, the Jedi were not completely blind. At the beginning of the Clone Wars, they grew increasingly suspicious of the Senate. Mace Windu, in particular, had rising doubts about Palpatine and sensed that the dark side surrounded him. He didn't know how or why, but he felt that the Chancellor was the key to the growing darkness. As the war neared its end, the Jedi Council made a critical decision. If Palpatine did not relinquish his emergency powers once General Grievous was dead, they would move against him and remove him from office. The problem was, they had realized the truth too late. The Jedi suspected a Sith plot, but by the time they acted, Palpatine had already manipulated Anakin. This ensured that any move against him would play directly into his hands. They tried to catch him off guard by visiting his office without notice, but we all know how that went. Palpatine had already manipulated Anakin into believing the Jedi were traitors, ensuring that when the Jedi confronted Palpatine, Anakin would see them as the real villains. And that was the Jedi's biggest blind spot. They were too bound by their own traditions and bureaucracy. Even when they sensed something was wrong, they hesitated. They waited for proof. By the time Windu and the other masters confronted him, Palpatine had already won. He didn't just deceive the Jedi, he controlled the narrative, twisting reality until the very people who could stop him were either dead or too paralyzed to act. In the end, Palpatine's greatest trick wasn't just hiding his dark side power, it was convincing the Jedi that the threat was somewhere else, right up until the moment he struck. Palpatine's true genius wasn't just hiding his identity or applying the Sith grand plan, it was creating a reality where the Jedi couldn't act until it was too late. Their arrogance, their reliance on tradition, and their inability to adapt all played into his hands. And that's why they never sensed Palpatine for what he truly was. Not because they weren't looking, but because he and the Sith before him made sure the Jedi were looking in the wrong place. If you enjoyed what you just watched, please like the video to help it reach more people who love Star Wars. Thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.